I'm John Batchelor. Mary Kissel, the editorial board of the Wall Street Journal and the host of Opinion Journal at WSJ Live, is here with me, and we're joined by Ed Hayes, our colleague, who comments on the NYPD. Ed has very strong friendships in the NYPD, and he's an attorney. He's a defense attorney in New York, and he's worked with the attorney. He's been a district attorney in New York, and so we depend upon him when there's police news. And Ed, there's always police news. So I begin with police news from Baltimore. This is CNN within these last hours. The Baltimore police investigation into the death of Freddie Gray doesn't support some of the charges, including the most serious, filed by the Baltimore City State's attorney, potentially allowing lawyers representing the police officers the opportunity to undercut the prosecution, according to officials briefed on the separate probes conducted by the state's attorney and the police. That's a lead story tonight. Does this surprise you, Ed? Good evening to you.
No, I felt it was an indictment in a hurry. There's a political motivation, and now they're going to have a heck of a time supporting it. And remember, also, 3 of the cops that they indicted are black. One of them was a black woman, so it's hardly a racially oriented crime. I mean, this guy had 5 cases pending at the time of his death and a total of 20 arrests. So it's not as if he was a saint. Plus, a person with a long history of drug abuse often gets involved in situations that will shorten their life.
So, Eddie, if the prosecutor wanted to bring a case, what was the correct charge to bring?
The correct thing to do is to investigate what went on for 2 hours rather than 20 minutes. And then if they want to bring charges, bring charges. But here they hardly did any investigation at all.
There is quiet evidence, Ed, that the police, not just of Baltimore, but the police of the United States, there are about 900,000 police in all the departments in the country. There's a lot of people, are pushing back. Over these last 24 hours, I've seen repeatedly Instagram and Twitter, which is part of the same operation, with photographs of 2 policemen, sometimes black and white, standing next to each other, with writing on their hand, "This life matters, pointing to each other. Ed, do you agree that the police should get involved in social media pushing back like this?
Absolutely. I think also that too many of these cases have become politically, the prosecution is politically based rather than based on the facts, and especially when you consider the nature of some of the people that got shot and what happens to people like the guy in Ferguson. He was perfectly justified in shooting that man, and now his career is over. His life is in danger. It's not right.
And there does seem to be a war on the cops emerging. I refer to the death of Officer Brian Moore here in New York, who was really doing routine police work, and the guy just took out the gun and shot him in the head and killed him. And he's not the first here in New York. We talked previously about 2 police officers who were assassinated in the middle of the day in Brooklyn. Is this a new environment, or are the politicians not doing enough to stop this?
One thing is, you're right, Mary, they're not doing enough. And what they did do is they responded to political pressure to stop the stop and frisk policies, which were effective, and now they've got policies that are ineffective. All they needed to do was train these young cops better so that they weren't as aggressive when they made these stop and frisk, and they knew a little bit better about how to do them. And now you have people getting killed. It's not just the cops that get killed, it's regular citizens.
Puzzle, Eddie, because we've seen Brian Moore is the young man who was buried this afternoon. I mean, the funeral was this afternoon. The governor of the state attended, Governor Andrew Cuomo, calling it a terrible tragedy. He acts frozen, Eddie. The governor acts frozen here about his opinion of this matter. The governor's not involved in NYPD decisions. I understand that's Bill Bratton, the commissioner, and Mr. de Blasio, the mayor. But do you think Mr. Cuomo can get involved in this? Can he help and move this story?
I think that he's going to keep hands off and wait for Bratton and de Blasio to take the lead. Why should he get involved in a very politically charged, nationally politically charged issue?
But, Eddie, the NYPD Police Commissioner, Bill Bratton, I'm reading a headline here from the New York Post, says policing is, quote, in a crisis. So it sounds like the police commissioner is stepping out in a way that the mayor and the governor aren't. Is that appropriate?
In the interest of full disclosure, Bratton's a client of mine. I think he's a fabulous police commissioner, and he's obviously saying what is true, that you cannot have this situation continue because you're having something, again, where large urban areas are out of control. There's looting, there's fires, You have assaults on policemen, assaults on regular citizens.
Yeah, sorry, I should read the full quote just to be fair to him. He says, quote, "Let's face it, we're in a crisis at this time in this country on issues of race, around effectiveness of policing, around police tactics, probably the most significant I've seen since I joined policing in 1970. That's the full quote.
Well,
that's a crisis. Let's go over the facts for people who don't live in the New York City area or didn't follow the news. My understanding is that Brian Moore, the 25-year-old who's now deceased, the NYPD, he is a plainclothes officer with his partner, and they are investigating a complaint, a possible violence complaint, or a possible robbery. They're driving on the street, and they see a man, I believe his name is Blackwell, but the shooter, the man who becomes the shooter, they see him hitching his pants in a certain way. What did they see, Ed?
Well, they saw him playing with his pants in such a way that they thought he had a gun in there.
And he did have a gun. They were right. They picked it up. Now, what did they do? What did they do wrong?
They pulled up next to him and they said they didn't do anything wrong. They did what, generally speaking, well, it's extraordinary for a guy to just pull out a gun and start shooting at the police in their car.
So they did nothing wrong.
Well, the only thing that they could have done differently, which they might have done differently in another environment, is get out of the car. Right. Before they approached the guy and said, "Hey, stop," and then frisked him.
All right, let me go back one more step because we have 30 seconds. Why did that man have a gun? Why is he out there shooting it out with the cops?
He's not even a gangster. Now this has become a hot word, but he's a thug. You know, he's not even a bona fide racketeer. And the thing is, if you had stop and frisk, he wouldn't do this because he'd be afraid that somebody would find it.
Ed Hayes. The officer's name is Brian Moore. He's been, the funeral's done at the funeral home on Thursday afternoon, so within these last hours. This is a very raw story in New York, but it connects to the events in Baltimore in a roundabout fashion, but tragedy for the nation. Mary Kissel, the editorial board of the Wall Street Journal. I'm John Batchelor.